The price at the gas pump includes a lot of hidden costs, and they're going up. How's that going to impact your budget? Ted and I will discuss it starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Ted, welcome back. You are our car expert. So that's what you're known as now. I'm the car
expert.
Guy. That's all.
Motorhead, gearhead, what do you want to call me?
That's it. So today I want to talk about gas prices and most importantly, how some of the hidden costs impact our budget. So question number one, who cares? Why are we discussing gas prices?
So 2/3 of our clients have cars. And in fact, the most frequently asked first question when somebody calls us is, am I going to lose my car? So cars are fairly important to everybody in our culture, and the impact of gas going up is going to be dramatic.
Yeah, and if you don't drive a car, but you eat food.
Right, well, then there's trucking and all that.
Exactly.
But I was going to say, if you don't drive a car, you know somebody who does.
That's right. Well, it's true. And I understand if you're living, right downtown, you don't need a car, you can take the bus, whatever, walk, whatever.
Right.
But
well, the bus still qualifies.
And that's still, yep. We don't have all electric buses here in Canada. So gas prices affect everything. That's the point. So to start, for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm going to put up a chart of the average gas price in Toronto since 2018. Mm-hmm. The numbers are similar across the country. And I'm going to have links in the show notes to all the stuff we're doing. So this is not just my opinion. I made up numbers. I did research.
Right.
I did research. Well, Miriam did most of the research.
Well, you don't usually give me paper, so obviously there's some hard numbers in here you want us to communicate.
Exactly. So Ted gets the script 12 seconds before we start recording. So here we go. So the numbers are similar across the country. Like I said, I'm starting with just Toronto numbers to give us a baseline. So for those of the listeners who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, whatever.
Right.
What is this chart showing? So tell me pre-pandemic where we were at and where does it go from there?
Well, what's interesting. So the numbers you've got from this chart are pre-pandemic was $1.30, and my recollection was it was like $1.25. So I trust your chart. It's accurate.
Well, and this is Toronto. It might have been slightly different in other places.
I also remember 2 months into the pandemic, so we're talking April 2020, it was less than 80 cents a liter. Mm-hmm. And you've 79 cents is what you've come up with, so I can believe that. I don't remember the peak in June of 2022 at $2 a liter, but that's probably because I don't buy as much gas as everybody else. Right now, we're sitting at about $1.60 for regular.
Yeah, and we are recording this on the last Monday in May. I don't know what the date is today.
Memorial Day in the United States, May 29th for the rest of the world.
May 29th, there you go. So as I was driving here this morning, I saw $1.65 at one of the stations.
That sounds right.
So those are obviously pretty big numbers.
Well, and if you're buying premium, it's $1.80, $8.85. So
and is diesel in the same range, or is it?
Diesel is up priced by premium, so it's about $1.80 a liter right now. Which was unusual because diesel used to be traditionally lower than gas.
Because of refining and whatnot, but that's not the case anymore. So, and of course, you're right. In the pandemic, we were below 80 cents because nobody was driving. So the supply and demand. So now here's the key. When I'm buying gas, I'm not just paying for gas.
In fact, you're not paying much for the gas at all.
It's
everything else you're paying
for a bunch of other stuff. Yep. So again, I'm going to throw this chart up on the screen here, but for our audio listeners, what is part of that $1.50, $1.60, break it down for us.
Well, so the biggest single item is the actual cost of the raw material, the gas. That doesn't mean the gas makes up the biggest percentage of the cost, but that's the biggest single item. Then the second biggest item is the wholesale margin. So you've got the company bringing the crude out of the ground and transporting it, and then you've got somebody that's refined it into gas, and then they're now selling it to the distributors. Now, in North America, that's what's the term? Vertical integration. Mm-hmm. They own all the different stages anyway, but each of these things is a different component. Each one gets a different piece of the pie. And then after that, it's taxes, and more taxes.
So in April of 2023, and I pulled these numbers off the Ontario government website.
Right, we can trust them. It's the Ontario government.
Sure. How could they possibly be wrong? And again, this is a couple months ago, but reasonably accurate. So at the time, the average pump price in Toronto was $1.55. It's a little higher now. 70 cents was the crude cost.
Which makes sense to me.
The actual gas you're buying. But then you got the wholesale margin, 26 cents, the retail margin, 8 cents, and then taxes.
Right.
which is about a third of the price.
18, 32, 42, 51 cents.
So 18 cents for HST, 14 cents for the federal carbon tax, 10 cents for the federal excise tax, and 9 cents for the Ontario tax.
It's almost a third.
About a third of the price is taxes. Okay. That's background number one.
Yep.
Now, here's what I want to talk about. Gas is made from oil, I believe. Comes out of the ground, gets refined, like you said.
Right.
But when I fill up my tank, I'm not just buying gas. There's something else blended in,
Right.
which is ethyl alcohol, but we call it ethanol. So where do we get ethanol from?
So ethanol is an alcohol product that's based on organics. The most common source is corn. And in fact, it used to be in movies. So we had our fuel crisis in the 70s that some of you may not have been alive at the time, but some of us were and driving. That's when this whole ethanol thing started. It was, well, there's enough corn and grain being grown in North America that we can convert that into fuel that we can burn in our cars.
So there's some kind of process they have to do to convert it into fuel.
That's right.
And so when I go to the pump today, what percentage of the fuel I'm buying is ethanol?
So it should tell you, but it could be as much as 10%. There are some distributors that'll sell it up to 15, but they really got to disclose it. So should be a sticker. If you're looking at buying, so you're buying regular gasoline, it could, Petro-Canada is a great example. There's a sticker on every one of their pumps that says may contain up to 10% ethanol.
And that's probably the law. And
right, it's disclosure.
I will put a link to the Cleaner Transportation Fuels Regulation. And as of now, fuel suppliers are required to blend 10% of renewable content into the gasoline, which is what you just said. And then that number is going to increase. 11% by 2025, 13% by 2028, 15% in 2030 and onward. So why are they putting ethanol in gas?
Well, so the argument is that it burns cleaner. So fewer hydrocarbons, you're a lesser impact on the environment when you're running your car. And the numbers are, if you believe their numbers, are pretty staggering. You've got it in. I saw it when I was reading through this earlier.
300,000
if we already use this stuff.
Yeah, so they're saying that by 2030, the change, putting it up to 15%, is expected to reduce up to 1 megaton of greenhouse gas emissions.
And they're saying 300,000 cars for what? For Canada? For Ontario?
I guess it must be for Ontario because these are Ontario regulations. So 300,000 cars sounds like a big number to me. But like you said, most of the ethanol used in Ontario comes from corn. Now, we do grow the corn in Ontario, so that's good for Ontario farmers. Sounds like it's good for the environment. Sounds all good. So is there any downside to the environment to growing all this corn that we're then effectively burning?
So first and foremost, it takes energy to produce the corn. And so the question that everybody's got to ask is, does it use less energy to produce the corn to produce this reduction in the fuel consumption and the greenhouse gases there, or more? And I think statistically it's more.
Yeah, and I'm going to put links to a bunch of studies because we're not scientists, so we don't know. Like we're making stuff up.
We're not farmers.
And we're also not farmers. So I will put links and everyone can do their own research. There's one study that said ethanol production using corn grain required 29% more fossil fuel energy than ethanol fuel produced. So now I think however you do the math, you can come up with whatever number you want, right?
That's right.
There was another study published last year in the U.S., Environmental Outcomes of the U.S. Renewable Fuel Standard. I'm sure you read it when it came out. And it found that due to the increased farming of corn for fuel, these changes increased annual nationwide fertilizer use by 3 to 8%. Okay, that makes sense. If you're growing more corn, you're going to use more fertilizer. Yep. Increased water quality degradants by 3 to 5%. So obviously you put fertilizer in, it leaks off into the water table. Yep. And caused enough domestic land use change emissions such that the carbon intensity of corn ethanol produced under this program is no less than gasoline and likely at least 24% higher. Okay, well, that's a pretty big range. Could be the same, could be 24% higher.
So if it is the same, then there's no real valid reason to do it. And if it's higher, it defeats the whole purpose of the process.
Yeah, that sounds not good. Now, again, this is not our point.
But you know what's interesting? You want to take 300,000 cars off the road. They just have to keep raising the taxes on gas, so we can't afford to put gas in our tanks.
Well, and I think that's exactly their plan here. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about money, because that's what this is all about.
Right.
I mean, we're all in favor of a better environment. However,
we'd like to live cleaner and longer.
Absolutely. So, but this is a show about money. So you've already said that ethanol is not as efficient as gasoline.
When you mix it with gasoline, you don't get as efficient a burn. It doesn't produce as much net output.
Because there's not as much stuff in it. It's not as dense.
So it's interesting. If you design an engine to burn on alcohol, high performance dragsters and that sort of stuff do run on pure alcohol, they're highly efficient. Well, actually, they're not concerned about the efficiency, but they get a lot of power out of it.
Because they want speed fast.
Right. When you are mixing it with gasoline, the net result is lower. And that's just the way it works.
So is this analogous to, if I burn a match, I get power really quickly. If I have a fire log, it takes a lot longer to get it burning, but it burns longer? Or am I mixing my analogies and that means nothing what I'm saying?
I'd have to give that a lot of thought.
There you go. Okay. I've come up with something Ted has to ponder here. So, okay, let's go back to my research then.
Right.
Using, and again, I will put a link. This is from the federal government now. Okay, so I've already quoted from the Ontario government. Now we're quoting from the federal government.
I trust the federal government
Absolutely.
a little less because, but anyway.
But and I'm not picking sides here. We have a different party in power in Ontario and federally.
There you go.
They both seem to be on the same page on this. So according to the federal government, again, I'll put a link in the show notes, using a 10% ethanol blend does not significantly affect a vehicle's fuel economy or horsepower. Although 10% ethanol blended gasoline contains only 97% of the energy of pure gasoline. Okay, that's what you just said.
Right.
This is partially compensated because it's cleaner burning, more combustion efficiency. Overall use of low blend increases fuel consumption by an average of 2% compared with pure gasoline. Okay.
Same number.
However, this is only a slight difference when compared with other factors that have a larger impact on fuel economy. For example, driving at 120 kilometers an hour rather than 100 kilometers an hour increases fuel consumption by an average of 20%.
Depending on the vehicle you're driving, yep.
So in the case of vehicles that use an 85% ethanol blend, which is what they are proposing to be here by the end of the decade, automakers generally equip these vehicles with larger fuel tanks to offset the fuel's lower energy content.
Right.
That way you can drive the same distance. Okay. Means I'm putting more in the tank, but whatever. Okay. So ethanol is not as energy dense as gasoline, but it does burn cleaner. So while burning, it's better for the environment. The question is, does producing it have negative impacts on the environment? Okay. We've already talked about that. We don't know.
Right.
Now, back to the money thing. I've done some math here. This may be incorrect.
Yep.
I tried my best though.
I'm still working on your whole match.
I know. You think about that there. For our paid subscribers, we'll get the answer to that question when we introduce a paid subscriber tier. With more ethanol and gas, I get less fuel efficiency, so I have to fill up my tank more often, and I'm often paying more.
Right.
That doesn't sound good. But then there is the federal carbon tax. I want to talk about this. It's currently 14.3 cents per liter, and it's going up by just over 3 cents per liter every year, so that by April 1st, 2030, it will be 37.43 cents a liter. Again, I'll put a chart up on the screen for those watching on YouTube.
So it's going to more than double.
More than double. 14 cents now, and then it's about 3 1/3 cents every year, so that by the time we get to 2030, it'll be 37 cents.
Right.
So as I look at it, there are three hidden costs here. First, you've got the increasing percentage of ethanol.
Right.
It's 10% now. With 10% ethanol, it's 97% as efficient as gas. By 2030, it'll be 15% ethanol, which I assume is something like 95 or 96% as efficient as gas.
Well, I know what we haven't looked at in here is what's the cost of a liter of ethanol. So is it actually less than the cost of a liter of crude?
And I don't know.
I'd be willing to bet that it is not.
And I don't know where I can find that number, actually.
It won't be easy to find.
But whoever's watching, put a link in the note in the comments so that we know. So again, I'm not a scientist.
Right.
I'm just doing math here. And I assume that by 2030, we'll be driving, I'll be driving brand new cars that have engines that are engineered to be more efficient at 15% ethanol.
Sure they will be.
That's what'll happen. I mean, I'm driving a 12-year-old car now, but maybe by then I'll have a new one. But for the sake of math, let's assume that going from 10% ethanol to 15% ethanol in my old car will be 1.5% less efficient, so I'll need 1.5% more fuel to go the same distance as I go today.
Well, basically, you're 4 or 5% less efficient than a pure gas engine.
There you go.
Yep.
So assuming the crude oil cost doesn't change, which is a ridiculous assumption, but let's assume it just stays exactly the same. instead of 69.6 cents, which is what it is today, it'll cost me, let's say, 70.5 cents or whatever per liter. So that's number one. Second hidden cost, we already talked about it, federal carbon tax. It's going to be 37.5 cents a liter by 2030. And HST.
Right.
HST is charged on the price. If you add the federal carbon tax to it, you're now paying more.
Tax on the tax.
It's a tax on the tax.
Right.
That seems evil to me, but whatever. So again, assuming HST stays at 13%, I'll be paying 14% on the higher carbon tax, and the extra cent a liter I'm paying for crude. So the HST on a liter of gas goes from 17.8 cents to 21 cents. Again, people, do your own math. Disagree with me if you want.
Well, if nothing changes at all it is the increase in the carbon tax, we go from the $1.55 it said now to $1.82, right?
Right. So again, I'll put the chart up on the screen here. You can see the gas price components, what it will look like in 2030. Assuming the crude cost stays the same, there's a penny increase because there's more ethanol in there. And you might be right, the ethanol may be increasing the cost by more than that. The big increase is that federal carbon tax now. And then, of course, the HST on the federal carbon tax also increases. Now, it could be that the wholesale margin and the retail margin also go up because as things go up, everything goes up. But I've kept them completely the same.
Right.
So April of 2023, the average price in Toronto was $1.55 a liter. By 2030, if the crude cost stays exactly the same, it'll be $1.82 a liter.
Right.
So that's an increase of 17% from current levels, but the tax is going up by close to 50%.
Correct.
So that's kind of baked in. Okay. So back to the whole discussion here, which is money. So what do you expect consumers to do when gas prices go up?
Well, so historically, fuel consumption has been an inelastic demand thing. So that's for your economists out there, which means the usage doesn't change dramatically with small increases or deviations in the price. We're not talking about small increases anymore. So just pre-pandemic, we were $1.25, $1.30. Now we're $1.55, $1.60, and you're talking about us going to at least $1.80. Without anything else changing. So I'm guessing it's easily over $2.
Well, it has to be because we've got inflation, we got, all the other things.
So at some point, people will change the way that they operate. So they either use their cars less. I mean, buying new, more efficient cars is possible. But have you tried pricing cars these days? Oh my God.
I have not. Are they more expensive than they used to be?
It's insane. Yes.
So my car is a 2011, I think I'm driving.
And so the average age of a car on the road these days in North America is 10 years old.
So I'm older than
So you're right
average.
where you're supposed to be.
And that's the average age. Okay.
Right.
But the car I bought, it's a Honda Accord. I mean, I think it's in the opening montage or used to be of our podcast here. I don't know what I paid for it in 2011.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't owe you anything.
But I assume that same car, if there was such a thing, would be a lot more expensive today.
Significantly more. And there wouldn't be the same car because you probably have no choice in 10 years to either get a hybrid or something.
Yeah, it's got all sorts of other stuff on it now.
Right.
So, okay, so as a consumer then, if I'm paying more, my only choice is, well, I guess I got to drive less.
Drive less. So if all of your expenses go up, you either have to find a way to increase your income or you've got to find a way to reduce your expenses. So you start doing the minimum or whatever, you cut where you can cut, and figuring out a different way to drive or different way to get around is probably going to be a major one. I mean, the cost increases we're talking here are significant.
And is it as simple as that though? Like if I work at the factory and my shift starts at 5 a.m., I can't take the bus because it doesn't start running till 6. I can't take the subway because there's no subway going out to the factory. So what am I supposed to do?
Well, so we've all heard about inflation, and we're talking at the very least, you're looking at a cycle where if it's going to cost you more to live, then somebody's going to have to pay you more, and if we have to pay you more, then it's going to cost you more to live. So it's just we're looking at some pretty unpleasant changes in the future.
So the increase in the fuel costs may just mean people have to get paid more, which means inflation is higher, which means people have to get paid more. And this may just be a cycle that continues. So, okay, I try to drive as little as I can. And,
But that means then we probably are looking at living differently. If you talk to all the damn urban planners, they want us in condominium towers stacked in on top of each other. They think, it doesn't matter if everybody's dream is to have a a standalone family home, the planners will tell you the most efficient thing is if we're all in big apartment towers. And so if you make gas so that nobody can afford to drive their car, I guess they're driving us all to apartment towers.
Yeah, and that makes sense, certainly if you're single, because, okay, I don't need 4 bedrooms if I'm single.
Right.
But if you got kids, we don't build condos in downtown Toronto for people with 3 kids.
We don't, but population densities are much higher other places in the world. Maybe they just all think we're spoiled.
Maybe, and we probably are because we got lots of land in Canada, so it hasn't been an issue.
Fuel prices are certainly higher in Europe and parts of Asia than we pay here. So, and maybe the government just thinks they can get away with all this because we've got it good.
Well, we have always been a car culture.
Right. And that's because the distances are so great.
Yeah. And we make our own oil here, or can. And so we're a little bit more insulated from it. So, okay. So prediction number 1 then is, I guess we all have to figure out ways to live closer to work, more dense scenarios, obviously more investment in public transit, that sort of thing. Although public transit also uses fuel.
That's right.
So even if they're all electric, you're still producing the fuel somewhere.
Correct. Well, they make the same argument with electric cars. The power's got to come from someplace. So it's all about consuming energy and the most efficient way to do it.
So if I'm thinking of purchasing a car and I'm thinking, okay, I know that over the next few years, the price of gas fuel is going to be going up.
Right.
Do I start thinking now about purchasing a more efficient car? Do I think about purchasing electric? Like what should be going through my head?
So just about anybody purchasing a car, one of their chief concerns is how efficient is it, because they know the fuel costs are going to go up, and they've always have gone up. I mean, as you know, we've got an electric car, and I'm still of the opinion that if you're a 1-car family, an electric car won't work for you yet.
Because why?
Well, so you get let's say you've got a car with on a range of 400 kilometers in the summer. In the winter, that drops down to more like 260. And so you know that I commute from Guelph to Kitchener for going to work. In the summer, I go a full week on a charge, no big deal. In the winter, 3 days. And so, again, it's much less expensive than gas, but the range anxiety in the winter is significant in Canada. You're not sure, okay, I know it's going to drop quickly. If it's really cold out, it's going to drop even quicker. Just how much charge do I have to have? So I don't think a family can get by with just an electric car these days, unless they're prepared to rent for any kind of, trips out of town or anything like that.
So if you want to go visit our trustee Rebecca Martin in Windsor.
Yeah. So I'd have to either plan my trip carefully or I'll take the gas car.
And because from Guelph to Windsor and back in the winter is more than 260 kilometers.
Right.
It's probably, a couple hundred just to get there.
From Guelph to Windsor, it couldn't make it.
Right,
because electric cars use much more power on a highway because there's no regeneration from braking.
I see. So you'd have to know that, okay, I'm stopping in London and charging. And if you're stopping in London and charging, how long does that take?
So if you can find a high-speed charger, 80% of the battery capacity in 45 minutes or so. But you got to know where all those things are. It can all be done. It's just a different way to live that we're not all used to. That's all.
Right. Whereas I go to the gas pump and it takes 4 minutes, and
you're gone.
I'm on my road.
Yeah.
So okay. So you're saying that if you were going to buy 1 car,
right,
at this point in time, unless you have a lifestyle where you're not driving long distances, you would not be going the electric route.
Seriously wouldn't consider it. Hybrid, possibly. I haven't looked at the cost recoveries for hybrid yet to see how many years do you have to drive it before you get your money back to pay for the premium of having a hybrid system. That would certainly make some sense. The most efficient gas model you can find probably still makes the most sense. And maybe you buy less car. So something that's lighter, more fuel efficient. It's designed to deal with the fact that it's going to get more and more expensive to operate a gas-powered vehicle. So
do you think in the future we will see fewer big-ass pickup trucks in the city?
We'll see fewer new ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they've got electric pickups. I mean, there are at least 3 of them out there, and they're pretty good. Again, if you are a tradesperson that knows that let's say you're working in the GTA, electric delivery vehicles, electric pickup trucks, all that stuff makes perfect sense because you're going from your shop to the work site and back. So you're probably not traveling 50, 100 miles a day tops. So that's 160 kilometers. So that's doable. If you are based out of Toronto and you're trying to do a job in Windsor, well, you won't. I mean, you'll have to get there some other way.
And in this pickup truck I'm buying that's electric, do I have the same kind of torque, juice? Can I haul my trailer? Can I do all my stuff?
It gets interesting. And electric engines have a lot more torque, so they've got a lot more power immediately. But you're pulling a heavy trailer, they use that power more quickly. So one of the solutions is in the future, we're likely going to see particularly commercial trailers that have got their own electric engines in them and their own battery systems. And so that's the only way to address the range issues with those.
So I'm plugging in my truck and I'm plugging in my trailer.
Yep.
And so assuming I have a house or a condo or something where I can plug this in, how much does it cost to put the charging unit in?
I think the charging unit cost me $1,200 installed.
And assuming you got enough power coming into your house, I guess.
Yeah, so if you've got an old home that's on a 60 or 100 amp box, putting one of these chargers in is a problem because they draw 40 amps. Most newer homes have got 200 amp boxes, so it's less of an issue.
And
it's like having an extra dryer in your house.
Dryer. So 40 amps is like another dryer.
Yep.
So I can't run 5 dryers at the same time at my house.
It would be problematic.
Because bad things would happen. So I can't be charging the car and using the oven and using the dryer and all that.
And so right now everybody's plugging in their cars at night when electricity prices are lower because demand is lower. I suspect that in the future that the price savings you get for doing these things overnight will disappear because the companies will realize they can recover more money.
So when you plug your car in, is it on a timer? Then you say, start it at 10 o'clock tonight or something?
They all have apps so that you just say, okay, when does the price drop? Start charging then. And for most cars, on a home charger, they'll charge in 7 or 8 hours. The cars with the really large batteries, some of the higher end luxury stuff, it's 13 or 14 hours.
Which is not overnight if you're taking
not overnight.
it out
You got to plan
morning.
it. Yep.
So, see, this is why we had you on the show not for the insolvency knowledge.
That's
it's for all the
because of cars.
It's for all the car knowledge.
Well, and one of the problems with this ethanol stuff, the really old cars, the ethanol is not good for the carburation and some of the rubber parts, the internal components of the car. Ethanol, for whatever reason, eats some of that stuff. So you got to be careful with your older stuff. Don't put it in a mid-60s muscle car.
I don't have a mid-60s.
Neither do I.
Do you consider a 2011 Honda Accord a muscle car? That's my question.
Someday they will.
Someday. Well, yeah, they'll be the antique cars. So,
that's right.
So I guess your choices are you buy a used car that is not as fuel efficient, but because it's not as fuel efficient, once all the supply chain issues are sorted out, presumably it's cheaper.
Right.
Than buying that new car, which is much more efficient. But it's, electric. I got to put a charger at my house. I got to do this. I got to do that.
Right.
So really, you got to crunch the numbers to figure out what the answer is.
And whatever car you're operating, keep the tire pressures right, maintain it properly. All of that stuff makes a difference. It's all, again, you won't remember some of this because you're not a car guy, but you're talking about in the 70s. All of these things were hot topics then because we were afraid that the gas pump was just going to get turned off. And so how do you get more power out of less fuel? Now we're doing it all again.
Pretty sure I wasn't driving a car in the 70s. I was born in 1964. So in 1974, I was legally were you? So 1974, I was 10. So yeah, I guess I got my license in 1980 or something like that. Right. So I was pretty close. I've been driving for 42 years, I think. Okay, so regardless of what you're doing, maintain the car, keep the engine good, put air in your tires, all that kind of thing.
Tire pressures is a big one.
And don't be crazy. You don't have to squeal away from every light.
Right. Jackrabbit starts. It applies to electric and gas cars. Right. If you're doing anything that uses more power, it reduces your range.
That's why you drive a car that doesn't have that much guts.
There you go.
Can't get into too much.
You want to use my Honda Beat?
There you go. I've seen it. It's the size of this table.
That's right.
It's very, very efficient, I'm sure. So is it true that gas prices are cheaper Monday to Thursday than on the weekend, or is that an urban myth?
I've heard that before. So, I guess there must be some truth to it, at least at some time.
So again, people can put a note in the comments as to what they see. I know one guy who he always fills his car up on Sunday because that's just his routine. He fills his car up on Sunday. I fill it up whenever I need gas. But
funny that way.
I know. I don't have a set schedule, but we had the food professor on talking about groceries, and he said, yeah, it's definitely more expensive on the weekend because that's when everyone's shopping. There's and they're not having all the big sales and everything. Whereas on Tuesday, it's like, okay, we gotta.
And if you are going out of town, it's going to be on the weekend, so they'll charge you more for going out of town
and long weekends and all the rest of it. So so I guess you just have to be conscious of all this. So okay, so any final comments you would like to make on any of these topics that we have not addressed?
Yeah. So the biggie with gas is, again, when there are little changes, nobody makes any adjustments to their lifestyle. These changes that we've had over the last couple of years now are big enough, and they're going to continue. That there are going to be changes. I mean, people don't have any choice. The money's got to come from someplace, and we all know your income never goes up as fast as your expenses, and the government taxes are going to drive these gas prices faster than anything else. They're just going to keep going up.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to do this show so that we can all be thinking ahead. Gas prices are going up. That's just the fact. It's already baked into the cake. Even ignoring inflation, costs are going to be significantly higher in the future. So now's the time to be thinking about it. Can I adjust my living arrangements so I'm living closer to work? Can I figure out how the transit system works? Can I learn to walk? What can I do?
What am I willing to change? What am I going to have to change to accommodate all this stuff?
And you don't want to get to the point where, boy, this kind of came at me and I didn't think it was going to happen. And now I've incurred debt to fund my monthly living expenses, which is very common.
Right.
We want you to be as proactive. And again, we're not taking a political stance on here. I don't have an opinion on whether the carbon tax is a great thing or the worst thing ever. I don't know what they're spending the money on. Maybe it's exactly what you said. It's just, hey, you make the price higher, people won't drive as much.
I believe it's a grocery rebate.
It could be. It could be.
I might be making a political statement.
That could be. So, and again, that's not the point of this. The point is the costs are going to go up. So you want to be prepared for it and be thinking in advance. And if you can do that, then, well, you got a fighting chance, I guess.
That's right.
Ted, the car guy, thanks very much for being here. That is our show for today. We now have over 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. Did you know that?
10,000 subscribers.
And we get a lot more people listening to the audio version than the YouTube version. So there's more people there. I know there are lots of people right now who are going for a walk listening to this.
We do have the perfect faces for radio, right?
The only time you want to watch this show is when we're putting charts up on the screen like we did today. So thank you to our audio listeners. Like I said earlier, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for subscribing and liking and sharing. That's how we got to the numbers that we're doing. The only way that we can provide all of this practical advice commercial free is if you like and subscribe. So we do appreciate it. Maybe we should start running commercials. You did mention Petro-Canada here.
I did. I think they'll give us something.
I'm sure they will give you a free car or something for the mention. I can't remember if it was complimentary what you said about them.
It wasn't.
Oh, okay. So forget that then. They're probably not going to advertise. So there you go. That is our show for today. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes for Ted Michalos. That was Debt Free in 30. 32. 32.